Hello and welcome to World Konnect, your journey across continents. Last week saw the building blocks being put together for Team Trump in the form of the first few members being selected for Trump administration, even as an emotional Barack Obama gave out his last presidential medals of freedom. While the US presidential election has reached finality, France is building up to a primary battle in the big presidential contest. Colombia finally has a new peace accord, and Bolivia is once again thirsting for water. We will tell you all that and more in this edition of World Konnect. Let's get started with the focus of the show. Cuba's Fidel Castro dies at 90 after a prolonged illness. Castro led Cuba for almost half a century to become a strong voice against US dominance in global arena. Fondly known as Fidel, he was seen as a revolutionary icon in the country who reshaped the future of many generations in Cuba. France is all geared up for the Republican Party primary on Sunday. Former Prime Ministers Fillon and Juppé face off in a battle that will decide who will lock horns with far-right National Front leader Marine Le Pen in a runoff vote in the 2017 presidential election. Donald Trump's transition team picks the first women for top-level posts in Trump administration. South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley to be U.S. ambassador to the UN and school choice advocate Betsy DeVos to be U.S. Secretary of Education, even as Trump's U-turns on some of his prominent campaign promises raise eyebrows. Govt and FARC rebels sign a new peace accord in Colombia after the original peace deal was rejected in a referendum. Under the agreement, FARC has to declare all their assets and hand them over, but the opposition camp is not impressed, threatening protests against the new accord and demanding another referendum. As Bolivians face the worst water crisis in 25 years, protests erupt over water scarcity. President Morales declares a state of emergency, blames climate change for Bolivia's water woes. Fidel Castro, the Cuban despot and the leader of the communist revolution, is no more. He was 90. Castro, who led the nation for nearly 50 years, became a strong voice against US dominance in global arena and lived long enough to see a historic thaw in relations between Cuba and the United States. Castro, credited by his supporters for reshaping the future of many generations in Cuba, commanded worldwide attention and is praised and loved by millions of Cubans. His greatest legacy is free health care and education, which have given Cuba some of the region's best human development statistics.
What Fidel Castro said in 1959 well described what he went through and what he oversaw. From leading a revolution in Cuba against the right-wing dictator General Fulgencio Batista to shaping a nation 90 miles away from the boundaries of a superpower, challenging its dominance and all might. Hailed by his admirers as a hero and reviled by his critics as dictator, Fidel Castro made headlines for almost 5 decades as the fiery, charismatic leader of the Caribbean's biggest island. Turning his back on his origins as the son of a wealthy sugar planter, he launched a political, social and economic revolution that transformed Cuba from a backyard playground for US tourists into a third world power. He was aided in creating the first communist administration in the Western Hemisphere by his close friend and revolutionary icon Ernesto Che Guevara. Accompanied with a group of revolutionaries, 32-year-old Castro overthrew an unpopular dictator in 1959 as he promised an end to his repressive rule. Castro's 2-year guerrilla campaign finally resulted in Batista fleeing the country and Fidel Castro assuming power in 1959. In 1960, Fidel Castro nationalized all US-owned businesses on the island. In response, Washington put Cuba under a trade embargo that is still continuing. Castro's belligerently anti-United States stance made him the target of a series of assassination attempts. These included an abortive invasion attempt at Cuba's southern Bay of Pigs in 1961 by more than 1,000 Cuban exiles trained and financed by the US CIA. Cuba's camaraderie with Soviet leaders kept inviting US ire. A pact between the two sides to secretly install Soviet nuclear missiles on Cuban soil virtually created a nuclear war-like situation. As Castro continued to foster close relations with Moscow, he built up the biggest army in the Western Hemisphere outside the US. During the 1980s, after years of economic struggle, Cuba began to enjoy reasonable prosperity, largely due to trade agreements with the Soviet bloc. But as Soviet republics started moving towards a market economy, Castro turned down USSR proposal to follow the suit and opted the traditional model for Cuba. The collapse of Soviet Union, the loss of old trading partners, and the continued US trade embargo resulted in slowing down of Cuban economy. The woes of Cuban economy continued for years, for which many blame none other than Fidel Castro. By the mid-1990s, thousands of Cubans took to the sea in a waterborne exodus to Florida and the dream of a better life. Many drowned, and it was termed a crushing vote of no confidence in Castro. Yet Cuba registered some impressive domestic achievements. What formed part of Castro's legacy was good and free medical care, free education, and improving lives. Fidel Castro had created his own unique brand of Caribbean communism, which, in his last years, he was forced to adapt, slowly introducing a few free market reforms to save his revolution. In 2006, just days before his 80th birthday, Castro handed over power temporarily to Raul after undergoing emergency intestinal surgery. As his health deteriorated, he permanently handed over power to Raul in 2008. Fidel Castro lived long enough to see a complete overturn in US-Cuba tie scenario. He saw his younger negotiate an opening with the outgoing US President Barack Obama. In December 2014, Washington and Havana announced to restore diplomatic ties for the first time since they were severed in 1961. The thaw in relations materialized when Obama visited Cuba earlier this year. Castro did not meet Obama, but after days of silence finally blessed the warming up in ties. The announcement of Castro's death sparked mixed reactions. While many mourned, there were others who cheered. But reactions apart, one thing all would agree is this extraordinary figure, Fidel, as referred to by his fans, has left a mark on history.
The election done and dusted, US President-elect Donald Trump and his transition team are now busy picking members of the Trump administration. The first women have been chosen for top-level posts. South Carolina Governor Nikki Haley will be US Ambassador to the United Nations, and school choice advocate Betsy DeVos will be Secretary of Education. Even as the Team Trump takes shape, Trump's U-turns on his campaign promises are raising a few eyebrows. Weeks after the US elected Donald Trump as its next president, all eyes are on what shape his administration team will take. One of the latest entrants into Team Trump is South Carolina Governor and a former Trump critic, Nikki Haley. She has been chosen as the next US ambassador to the United Nations. 44-year-old Haley, one of the two women chosen for a job in Trump's cabinet, is a daughter of Indian immigrants and represents what some Republicans hope could be the new face of their party, a younger and more diverse generation of leaders. Trump, meanwhile, is tapping an even more hardline critic, Mitt Romney, for the Secretary of State. The Trump transition team has crossed another department position off the list. As per media reports, Trump picked Betsy DeVos, a longtime Republican from the state of Michigan and a charter school advocate, for Education Secretary. Senator Jeff Sessions is Trump's choice for U.S. Attorney General. Sessions was the first U.S. senator to endorse Trump's presidential bid and has been a close ally since. The former federal prosecutor has long taken a tough stance on illegal immigration, opposing any path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. Retired Lieutenant General Michael Flynn has been picked as National Security Advisor. An early supporter of Trump, Flynn is serving as vice chairman on Trump's transition team. He began his U.S. Army career in 1981 and served deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq. He became head of Defense Intelligence Agency in 2012 under President Barack Obama, but retired a year earlier than expected and became a fierce critic of Obama's foreign policy. U.S. Representative Mike Pompeo is Trump's choice for CIA director. Pompeo is a third-term congressman from Kansas who serves on the House of Representatives Intelligence Committee, which oversees the CIA, National Security Agency, and cybersecurity. A retired Army officer, West Point and Harvard Law School graduate, Secretary Pompeo supports the US government's sweeping collection of Americans' communication data and wants to scrap the nuclear deal with Iran. The belligerent Trump that we saw during the campaign trail has softened his positions on at least three prominent issues: climate, torture and prosecution of Clinton. The president-elect, who had branded climate change a hoax perpetrated by the Chinese and dismissed efforts to fight it as a politically motivated waste of time and money, now says that perhaps action was needed and that he might follow through with America's commitments in the international climate agreement. After threatening to pursue criminal charges against Hillary Clinton, a signature promise of his campaign, Trump now says he would use his influence over law enforcement to argue that it is time to move past Clinton investigations. And he backed off from his repeated calls for a return to waterboarding and other discredited torture techniques to fight terrorism, saying a single conversation with a retired Marine general changed his mind. However, keeping with his campaign promise, Trump vowed to withdraw from the 12-nation Trans-Pacific Partnership on his first day in office. Trump's declaration appeared to snuff out any hopes for the deal, a signature trade initiative of President Barack Obama, 5 years in the making, and meant to cover 40% of the world economy. Colombia finally has a peace deal between the government and the left-wing rebel group FARC, but the road to peace was a difficult one for Colombia after an earlier peace accord was rejected by Colombians in a referendum. With the opposition camp threatening protests against the new accord and demanding another referendum, the question is, will the deal be able to end Latin America's longest-running conflict?
Nearly 2 months after millions of Colombians rejected the peace deal signed between government and FARC rebels, the two sides inked a new version of the accord, aiming to address the concerns of the people. Unlike the September 26 signing ceremony, which was a grand affair, the new deal signed on Thursday was a low-profile event. The original pact was narrowly and unexpectedly defeated in an October 2nd plebiscite for being too lenient on the insurgent group. Santos, who won the Nobel Peace Prize last month for his efforts to end the conflict with the insurgent group, wants to get the deal in place as quickly as possible to prevent risk to the fragile bilateral ceasefire.
Now that the agreement has been signed today, its implementation can begin as soon as Congress ratifies it. I hope that in line with the established process, its ratification will go ahead in the course of next week.
Some key points in the deal have been changed. The FARC will have to declare all their assets and hand them over. The money will be used for reparation payments for the victims of the conflict. Concerns by religious groups that the agreement undermined family values have been addressed. A time limit of 10 years has been set for the transitional justice system. FARC rebels will be expected to provide exhaustive information about any drug trafficking they may have been involved in. The peace agreement will not form part of Colombia's constitution. However, many Colombians still appeared outraged because, like the original agreement, the new document offers no jail time for FARC leaders who committed war crimes like kidnappings and massacres, and it allows them to hold political office. Former President and opposition leader Alvaro Uribe, who spearheaded the no camp during the referendum, voiced his dissatisfaction over the new deal. He was furious over the idea that the government will ratify the new deal in Congress instead of holding another public vote.
The government decided to ignore the national pact, which would have been appropriate, and we, in all clarity, have to say to you that for the political responsibility of many Colombians, we will seek a mechanism of popular participation to honor the defense of points which the government did not want to accept.
The government and the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, FARC, have been in talks in Havana, Cuba for the last 4 years, hammering out a deal to end a conflict that has killed more than 220,000 and displaced millions in the Andean nation.
The ghost of water scarcity has come back to haunt Bolivians. Having endured 2 water wars, they are now confronted with the worst water crisis in 25 years. The severe water shortage has triggered a national emergency. Water rationing is the order of the day, and President Morales is pointing fingers at climate change. That begs the question, is this the devastating impact of global warming, and has lack of foresight and water management on the part of Bolivian authorities compounded the problem?
Residents queuing up in long lines, men and women running with buckets as supply vehicles arrive, protests demanding effective measures for immediate relief. All of this is a common view in Bolivian capital La Paz. As the country grapples with one of its worst droughts in 25 years, government was forced to declare a state of emergency. According to government estimates, the drought has affected nearly 125,000 families and threatened 290,000 hectares of agricultural land and lakhs of cattle. Authorities called an end to the school year 2 weeks early to prevent the spread of infection and sickness among children. The three main dams that supply water to the city of La Paz are almost dry. The main Ajuan Kota Dam is at 1% of its capacity, while the other two dams average 8% of their capacity. This has led to the unprecedented programmed water cuts and rationing of water. But despite emergency plans being put in place, several neighborhoods have gone 2 weeks without water.
We need water, and for that reason we are setting up a block here. There is no water since Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The bills are high and come by Monday evening, but the water is dirty, yellow, and now the dirty water is what we have to drink.
Critics have questioned the emergency plan, as some of the tanks that have been put in service to supply water were previously used to transport fuel, posing concerns with regard to water contamination and health risks. The water scarcity has so far affected medical services at hospitals. The shortages and issues of contamination have also extended to hospitals, where procedures are being limited to emergencies, given the lack of clean water. President Evo Morales called on local governments to devote funds and workers to drill wells and transport water to cities and vehicles, with the support of the armed forces from nearby bodies of water.
The current Supreme Decree declares a state of national emergency due to the drought and water shortage in different regions of the national territory provoked by adverse climate phenomena. Therefore, through this Supreme Decree, mayors, governors and the national government have the obligation to mobilize economic resources to meet a human right, that is, water.
Bolivia was home to two water wars in 1999 and 2004, after which control of water was handed over from private hands to the state. The Bolivian government has also blamed climate change for the present scenario. Rising temperatures have shrunk the country's Andean glaciers between 30 and 50% since the 1970s and could melt many of them away in coming years.
On the eve of Thanksgiving, US President Barack Obama and the first family served Thanksgiving meals to residents of the Armed Forces Retirement Home in Washington. The retirement home houses 405 previously enlisted service members. Outgoing US President Barack Obama wished a happy Thanksgiving to Americans in his weekly address. Addressing the public during Thanksgiving for the last time as a president, Obama urged Americans to stay united in the wake of the presidential election.
A few short weeks later, Thanksgiving reminds us that no matter our differences, we're still one people, part of something bigger than ourselves. We are communities that move forward together. We're neighbors who look out for one another, especially those among us with the least. We are always simply Americans.
Besides the Thanksgiving, US President Barack Obama awarded his last Presidential Medals of Freedom, the nation's highest civilian honor, to 21 individuals this week, whom Obama said helped make me who I am. And the ceremony was not without dramatic moments, like an emotional Obama self-admittedly getting all choked up while presenting the Presidential Medal of Freedom to Ellen DeGeneres in a tribute to her courage.
White House witnessed a star-studded event even as it prepares for a new occupant. In one of his last acts as the president, Barack Obama gave away the 2016 Presidential Medal of Freedom, the highest civilian honor in the US. People who have made outstanding contributions to the security or national interest of the United States, to world peace, or to cultural or significant public or private endeavors receive this annual honor. Rocker Bruce Springsteen, Motown soul singer Diana Ross, former basketball champions Michael Jordan and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and actors Tom Hanks, Robert De Niro, Robert Redford were among those awarded the prestigious medal. This year's list also included Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates and his wife Melinda for their philanthropic foundation, and TV talk show host Ellen DeGeneres, attorney and former chair of the Federal Communications Commission Newton Minow, producer and comedian Lorne Michaels, designer and artist Maya Lin, and Miami-Dade College president Eduardo Padron were also presented with this award.
After the US presidential election, we are building up to another, this time in France. The European country is all geared up for the Republican Party primary on Sunday. The winner is widely expected to face far-right National Front leader Marine Le Pen in a runoff vote in the presidential election next May. Facing off on Sunday are two former Prime Ministers of France after 7 candidates were whittled down to 2 in the party. It is going to be the Republican Party's first such primary vote modelled on the US system.
Former French Prime Ministers François Fillon and Alain Juppé face off this Sunday in the Republican Party primary. The winner will be the presidential candidate for the Conservative Party in the next year's election. The two leaders emerged the frontrunners last Sunday, pushing former President Nicolas Sarkozy to the third position. Sarkozy lost no time in supporting Fillon, who served as the PM under his presidency. None of the leaders had crossed the 50% mark required to make them an outright winner last Sunday. Fillon unexpectedly stormed into the first place with 44% of the vote, and Juppé second with 28%, and Sarkozy in third place with 21%. Opinion polls indicate strong showing for 62-year-old François Fillon, who also took a strong lead in the presidency candidate debate against rival Alain Juppé. 71-year-old Alain Juppé had served as the Prime Minister of France under President Jacques Chirac. Both leaders plan a supply-side economy strategy with cuts in public spending and raising the retirement age. They differ on major issues on the economic and social fronts. Fillon proposes more public sector job cuts, which Juppé deems unrealistic, and a longer working week.
In order to re-establish the good health of our economy and our country, I want deep reforms, credible and doable reforms without brutality. His economic program seems badly researched to me. It will not hold as its brutality condemns it to failure. And so I retort that we are not radical now. I wonder when we will be. I say to him that if we do not take all the risks now, then I ask myself, when will we take them?
Fillon also has a supporter in Russian President Vladimir Putin. Fillon says Russia is not a threat to France's security and should be an ally in fighting terror. Putin welcomed his intentions to improve ties with Russia. Juppé, who had served as foreign minister and defense minister, however, sought to take a cautious stand and said dialogue with Russia will not be at the cost of France's principles. For Fillon, it is a two-way battle as Sarkozy's PM. While some root him for the experience, he is also seen as a part of the failure of the Sarkozy era by others. The two contenders, who till now have been seen as mild-mannered prime ministers, are now strongly convincing the conservative voters of their ability to be the nominee for the top French post. The Republican primary vote is open to anyone by paying €2 and is not restricted to members of the Conservative Party, which also makes the results unpredictable. The winner of Sunday's Conservative primaries vote will be battling far-right National Front leader Marine Le Pen in next year's presidential battle.
Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan has warned that Ankara could open its gates for migrants to Europe if pushed by the European Union. The stern message came a day after European lawmakers voted for a temporary hold to EU membership talks with Turkey. Addressing a conference in Istanbul, Erdogan directed comments towards the European Parliament, saying that when 50,000 migrants amassed across Greece, European leaders caused an uproar. European Union lawmakers called on Thursday for a temporary hold to EU membership talks with Turkey because of what it sees Ankara's disproportionate reaction to July's failed coup. One more referendum in the long list of public votes being held this year. The Swiss will vote this Sunday on whether to make a speedy withdrawal from atomic energy production. Recent surveys indicate a neck-and-neck showing for the yes and no camps. In Iraq, a suicide truck bomb killed about 100 people, most of whom were Iranian pilgrims. The attack took place at a petrol station in the city of Hila, about 100 kilometers south of Baghdad. The pilgrims were en route back to Iran from the Iraq holy city of Karbala. The gas station has a restaurant in its premises that is popular with travelers. 5 pilgrim buses were torched by the force of the blast from the explosives-laden truck. Islamic State claimed responsibility for the attack in an online statement released by the Islamic State-affiliated Amaq news agency. And here's a look at some more happenings making headlines across the globe. If you are a jazz lover, Spain is the place to be because Madrid is hosting the International Jazz Festival till the 30th of November. That's where the who's who of jazz music have set the world on fire.
Jazz lovers in Spain are being treated to a month-long musical extravaganza at the Madrid International Jazz Festival. Performances of singers and musicians from around the world marked the event with their soulful renditions, new albums and trendy tunes. The musical genre, having its origin in the African-American tradition, has once again brought the international community swaying to the blues. The essence of the different places the artists belong to adds to the richness of the musical form. The home band Oh Sister performed their fourth release, Stomp and Enjoy. The Spanish band's new release reflects the swing spirit seen in their 8-year-old band career. From the other end of the Atlantic, New York soul singer Robin McKell presented her new album, The Looking Glass. The album, entirely prepared by McKell, contains personal material that's close to her. Jazz legend John Scofield's Country for Old Men also delighted music lovers. The guitarist, who's a self-confessed fan of country music, has in the new album attempted to give a jazz feel to classic country tracks.
This brings us to the end of this edition of World Konnect. Do send us your feedback on the show. You can write to us on our email ID, which is worldkonnect.ddnews@gmail.com. You can also log on to our Facebook page and tweet to us at World Konnect DD. Before we leave, take a look at how Paris's Champs-Élysées Avenue is illuminated by its annual Christmas decorations to welcome the festive season. With that, I and the entire team of World Konnect will take your leave. Thanks for watching.